Welcome back to Racing Rundown here on YouTube. I'm Eric DeCoster, and we're back with another 2023 Kentucky Derby contender profile, taking a look at Mandarin Hero. The second horse in from the Also Eligibles will be number 22 in your program for the first Saturday in May. Draws in after a few defections. He came in after the defection of Lord Miles on on uh, on Saturday or on Thursday, excuse me, for Saturday's race. So huge implications there, and it's a horse that a lot of people like, and we'll dive into his career, the good and the bad, and what he's done so far, and how he makes sense in the Derby. Now that we have a drawn field in comparison to some of our other profiles, easy to see where he could sit in the race and things like that. So Mandarin Hero, he comes in off of a very good second in the Santa Anita Derby, his first U.S. start after making 5 runs in Japan. That's where he's from. He's running in their secondary circuit, the NAR, at Oi Racetrack there, and he did great work. He started his career 4 for 4, undefeated, went through the ranks very nicely, ultimately took out the Haiseko Kinen in November. And, it's a $250,000 race regardless of quality and the like. So he absolutely rolled late there, won by only a head. He kind of has a penchant for keeping races close, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then in his only Japanese start of 2023, he was beaten in neck while rolling late. To be beaten only in neck in that spot, going a mile and an eighth for the first time. And then last time out was that Santa Anita Derby. He broke well from an outside post, tucked in, had a great trip under Kazuchi Kimura, made the move, split horses late, just was unable to punch by Practical Move in the dying strides, lost by a nose there. So that was a huge start for a U.S. debut to run with a multiple graded stakes winner in Practical Move, beat Skinner, who was well regarded at the same time. That was just a huge run from that horse. So a big effort there. And he fired a big buyer at the process. He only lost by a nose, of course, put through 100, which was equal to Practical Move, one of a few horses in here with a 100 buyer from that last start, and most of the other figure makers will back up the strength of that performance as well. And with those 2 runs, it's very easy to envision this horse taking a step forward with his second start in the U.S. Unlike Derma Sotogake, who's the only remaining Japanese runner, and even prior runners from overseas, whether it was Japan, whether it was Dubai or Europe, something like that, most of those horses were making their first start in this country. They'd not been on North American soil. They'd had to come with some big travels. And sure, a horse like Derma Sotogake has been here for weeks now, but there is still going to be a huge question mark over his ability to take that big ship, be away from home for Derma Sotogake, not to make this about him, just kind of emphasize the struggles there. Be away from home for 5-6 months now because he ran twice into the Middle East, Dubai and Saudi Arabia. So that could take a toll on his horse. Whereas Mandarin Hero, away from home, but then he's been at least in a similar place. It was a much shorter trip from California to Kentucky than Dubai to Kentucky, and that even included some stops along the way. So for Mandarin Hero, he's well more acclimated to that, the U.S. style of racing too. He got a glimpse of that in the Santa Anita Derby run. I don't think that should be overlooked, that this will be his second start in the U.S. That should work out well, and I'm sure the connections, Teranobu Fujita, the trainer there, getting his chance to have his first Derby starter and know his horse is acclimated to North American dirt racing. There are some weaknesses to Mandarin Hero's record. It's promising before that, but we do have to remember that it was the weaker circuits in Japan, and he did lose 2 back. He lost by a neck. Sure, it wasn't that bad, but he has a penchant, and I'm just going to touch on it now, for waiting on horses. His wins, his 2 wins prior to the second in the Kumatori show were both very short. And in the Haiseko Kinen, his stakes win of his career, he hung the entire length of the stretch. He at no point did he want to bury his opponent. The Kumatori show, he had every chance to go by the horse in front of him. He just kind of waited and lost by a neck. And I think in the Santa Anita Derby, you kind of saw the same thing. He had his chance at the top of the lane, was really only a length back for probably the final 3/16ths, and he never was able to will by Practical Move. Now, Practical Move is a pretty game and gritty horse, but I don't know if a horse that knows how to finish off a race doesn't go by him, because Practical Move, as gritty as he was, I'm starting to think maybe Mandarin Hero was a little just lazy trying to get by that last horse. So that's obviously concerning, given that's something he's shown in his last 3 starts. It's clear he does not yet know how to put away his competition, and then you move to a 20-horse field like the Kentucky Derby, it could be tougher. And that's what beat him 2 back in the Kumatori show But regardless, that was a weaker opponent, Hero Call, than he'll face in the Kentucky Derby, unless Hero Call would have been a Kentucky Derby winner by being here. He also doesn't have any wins beyond a mile, and just historically, that's not a great trait to exhibit. There's been a few here and there. I think right last year, obviously with Rich Strike, he was one of those, but very few and far between, and they've all been pretty big long shots who were pretty pace dependent runners at that. That's really the trend we see with those types of winners. So once again, you you kind of question the distance with this horse, or even just the experience winning. More so, he'll probably get the mile and a quarter, but you like to have a horse that knows how to win going a little further. I just don't know if he can prove that yet. He certainly hasn't in his last two starts, as good as they've been. He once again does the waiting thing. And finally, all of his wins up again against lesser company. 4 career wins that are great, but they were not to the top level horses he'll be facing in the Kentucky Derby. Regardless of the strength of the crop, regardless of how good the run was in the Santa Anita Derby, you can't deny that all of his wins were against lighter company. So he's very much a mixed bag because his only U.S. start was so huge over at Santa Anita, but there are some pretty glaring weaknesses in my opinion. The biggest of which is that he likes to hang. And that's not a tangible negative, so I didn't necessarily put it in the cons, but I think that's probably the biggest thing is he tends to not want to make the lead in his starts. But he is improving. He is improving. He is getting better. He's run big race after big race. He's still pretty unexposed. Finally, I think he can sit a good trip. He'll be outside of horses coming from mid pack. He'll just have to make up some ground, but I think he can do that no problem. It's just a question of if he wants to be passing horses late, and also who knows, maybe some of those other closers look a little better. He's a horse I would not blame anybody but for using in exotics. I just don't view him as a win contender because I don't know if he has that winning ability quite yet. That's all I have for you guys on this Kentucky Derby contender profile. We'll see you next time here on Racing Rundown.